Hello. Testing. Are you listening to me out there? Can you hear me clearly? Okay, good. Give me a moment or two and then we'll actually get started and give it a little time for any stragglers to show up. In the meantime, if you have any questions or ideas for conversation topics tonight, feel free to put them in the chat. I might consider them. I had only one gaming related thing I was going to talk about, but the rest of the chat will belong to the audience tonight. Yikes. All right. Chat, then I'm probably going to end up talking about Watchmen or Doctor Who or something like that. So if you have gaming related questions or gaming related subjects and I find them worthwhile, then we'll be doing that. I guess we might as well get started. 26 people watching now. It's close to the magic number. If you want me to do more frequent live streams, then be sure to support me either on Patreon or PayPal or by purchasing my games, including, well, Lion and Dragon here. Whoa, gotta watch that. This is stable of setups. Lion and Dragon and Dark Albion, Cults of Chaos. The new Medieval Authentic Old School Companion, which is a source book for not just Lion and Dragon, but any OSR game, really. Really, it could be any D&D game, which is for making your game more medieval authentic. It has a whole bunch of material on different things, everything from like making an order, a knightly style order for clerics, courtly events and intrigues, a medieval authentic take on fairies and the worlds of the fairies, which includes elves, of course, and how the elves would be in a medieval authentic game. Some new character classes you can use as NPC character classes or potentially PC classes depending on your style of campaign, and a lot of magical stuff in the form of complement whatever magic system you already have. So all that stuff. There's 266 pages in the book. The book is now a copper bestseller on DTRPG. Link is in the description below, I hope. It should be. Yeah, it's in there. And yeah, you can pick it up. You'll find it well worth your while. And anything you buy that way, it's giving me a little tip, and it's also giving you material for your game. So be sure to do that. But most of all, if you end up liking this live stream, which we're about to begin, please share it. And share my other videos all over the place, everywhere that you think it will appeal to certain gamers, change certain people's minds, or just piss off the SJWs. Please share it liberally, let's say. I know quite a few of you don't let's use it in the traditional sense of in great quantity, with great freedom of sharing it. Share it everywhere you like. Okay. So, to formally begin, lighting my pipe. Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords. And tonight I'm doing a live stream. I haven't done a live stream for a while. Hopefully it'll go well. You know that between my technical skills and my somewhat rambling talking style, some people would probably qualify every video I ever make as a disaster. So live streams are especially dubious. But it seems like my audience likes it. You know, I get a lot of views, comparatively speaking. You know, a lot of people live streams usually get less views than regular videos for anyone, almost always. But for me, that ratio is not as bad as it tends to be, I think, for some other people. So that's good. I'm glad people like it. Tonight, as I said, if you have topics for session, you should let me know in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. Sadly, as you can see, there is no such thing as super chat here because I believe I think it's not available in the place where I am. So if you want to give me a tip along the lines of this, then go to the DTRPG and pick up some kind of RPG Pundit Presents issue. You can check them out. Every one of them has got good stuff in it, ranging from 99 cents to $4.99. Full of material that is interesting for use in your D&D or OSR games. Okay, I'm going to look through here and see what some people have been writing already. I see that there's quite a bit of chatting even before the video began, but okay. Unscripted Unchained says, Watchmen Season 2 canceled. Yeah, I might speak about that if we have no other gaming topics left to talk about. That's something I was meaning to talk about, because I did a video about it before. And it proved I was right. Fred Daniel says, is CR challenge rating or critical role? It was meant to be critical role, which is the only subject that I was going to kind of mention tonight. The only one that I had pre-planned, which I don't plan to take up the whole live stream on. There'll be lots of other topics, but it'll just be topics that you've brought up. Critical role is in the news again, mainly because it has, you know, Wizards has just put out, I guess, it's the Critical Role sort of source book, their world book or whatever you want to call it, that has all kinds of new material in it. I don't know if anyone watching has actually read it. If you have, share your opinions of it in the live chat. I've heard that it has a lot of stuff for D&D 5th edition. And anyways, the point is that the release of this book has come with great fanfare and should be in a way seen as kind of the victory of Critical Role in terms of it now owns the mainstream of D&D 5th edition or something like that. And yet at the same time, I think the release of this book has seen more pushback against Critical Role, and especially against the kind of woke culture warriors that surround Critical Role, than has ever been seen before on social media. So in fact, this might be, you know, is this Critical Role taking control forever, or is this their swan song, really? Is this like the peak of where this is as high as they can go, and after this, the fad that is Critical Role and a lot of these other very highly produced, very fake live stream shows, is that going to go away? Is that going to start disappearing? It might even be the peak of D&D 5th edition's popularity, of D&D's popularity back in the mainstream culture. I'm not saying necessarily that it is, but it could be. And yeah, I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, but it certainly is a mixed bag. So these are the topics that I want to cover. This is the first topic that I want to cover tonight. Ryan Lynn says, I will say this about Critical Role. I enjoy it, but I know it's mostly script, but it has put the idea in the player's head. This the DM does not about this in one of my previous videos. It's called the Mercer effect. They've even named it, right? And yes, but I think that's not really the worst thing bad, because obviously this is a professionally scripted show that has been used to memorize lines, but rather they all kind of know what they're doing and how to do it and what to do. It's an improv show using, it's fair to say, professional, not great, but professional actors. Professional is no rating of quality of acting there, but they're all actors, they're all Hollywood people, which we all know what that means, right? What the kind of values that they have and the kind of willingness to dissemble that they have. So they're making this show, and it creates this concept first of this idea that some people who really think that this is just improvisation. It's like little kids who think that WWF wrestling is real. It doesn't it doesn't make sense that an adult wouldn't realize this. But the other big problem is that it also means that particular ridiculously twee, cutesy poo and over emotive and acting like you're on a TV show style of game that is Critical Role and all the many Critical Role clones that are out there is for some newbie players their idea of, well, that must be how to play D&D, period. And it's not. That's not the way to do it necessarily. It's one way to do it. I'm not saying it's not a legitimate way to play it if that's how you want to, but it means that this is like the aging millennial style of playing D&D. And there's a lot of other better styles of playing D&D, including the type of campaign you run. It doesn't have, not every campaign has to be this, oh my god, so random, full of manic pixie feminist characters and gay bards and all kinds of weird demi-humans that don't come out of any particular myth at all, but just sort of out of furry culture or whatever, and that all the values in the 21st century, West Coast values, and everybody acts as though they're in 2019 or 2020 now, I guess, Los Angeles or San Francisco or Seattle. This is the real problem. Trying to check out if anyone's added anything here since. Pausing from that for a moment, I'll say some other topics here that people have. How do you feel about RPGs that abstract movement into zones? Not a fan of the idea myself. Well, that was from Greasy Smith. Greasy, I think that it's okay, but at that point you might as well just use the theater of the mind. There's miniatures on one end, theater of the mind on other. After that, you're probably actually be more accurate using the concept of the theater of the mind than creating arbitrary zones that don't actually mean anything. Stuff about superheroes that don't interest me. Lord Metal Demon says, "Hail RPG pundit from the snowy Canadian prairies." Well, I hear that you guys are freezing your asses off up there right now in the snowy Canadian prairies, in my home country of Alberta, my homeland. That it's like at least the last couple of days it's supposed to be like 31 below over there. Well, over here in South America right now it is 11:15 in the evening and it is 31 degrees above, and this is in Celsius for all of you Americans, so you'll have to do the version. But basically where it is about as cold as hell, and down here it's about as hot as hell, frankly. Jesse Finnegan says, Critical Role was useful to me. Oh, no, sorry, CR. He's thinking challenge rating here. I think challenge rating was useful to me. I have never believed in challenge rating either. Challenge rating is a stupid concept that's out of this idea of gamifying the world itself, right? As if your adventurers aren't going to wander, if they wander into a cave, that what they're going to find there is something level appropriate for them to fight. That's not how a verisimilitudinous world works. Buried Axeblade goes, Super Chat is like asking money for the Google charity. Well, yeah, okay, so then buy my products. I agree. I'm not a particular fan of or of Super Chats or things like that. But some people really wanted me to have a Patreon to give me money through that, so I did it. So there is a Patreon link. I can't get Super Chat anyways. I'm sure that there are some people that would be really insisting I did if I was potentially able to. But, buy my products and tell me on the chat or in comments in the video what you've bought. And even if what you want from it is, what do you want from it? Do you want more regular videos? Do you want more live streams or something like that? You're welcome to tell me what you've purchased and what you would hope I do more of. Jelio says, why won't Wizards of the Coast release a D&D setting that we already love, like Greyhawk or Spelljammer? Well, I think one of the reasons for that is that the subsequent editions of those settings are not as likely to end up doing nearly as well as the original ones. The big original fans are going to not... I think, from what I understand, the Dark Sun release was disappointing, right? So you've got a lot of people with nostalgia for the old one, old guys that have nostalgia, or girls, or whatever, that have nostalgia for the old setting books of stuff like Greyhawk. But then when a book comes out, they're going to compare it to the original box set and say, oh, it's not as good, I'm not going to buy it, right? And new people have no particular alliance, right? A newbie who's joined this year has no idea what Greyhawk is, right? Or Spelljammer. So at the same time, there's also, a desire to create a setting that fits the corporate identity of Wizards of the Coast. This is a thing that came up pretty early in the history of Wizards' involvement. Like literally, it was already happening in third edition. They had made Forgotten Realms kind of the official setting of third edition, but only because third edition was what came out at a time when Forgotten Realms was at its very peak, and so, or just past its peak, right? But it was still really huge, so they had to do that. But very quickly, they worked on what would eventually become Eberron, which is a completely corporate design, right? It wasn't like this whole thing of the contest. It was complete bullshit. The guy who won it worked for them in the past. It was the whole thing was set up. The jig was in for them to create a setting that they wanted people to think was as original and authentic as the old Forgotten Realms Greyhawk type settings, but was actually completely built along parameters of this is what we want as a corporation. We want it to be able to have every world, every monster, every class. It has to be able to include every magic item, every prestige class, everything that we want. It also has to introduce certain new classes that are going to be cool and exciting in these particular ways, and so that's what they did. And what they're doing with Wizard settings now is basically the same. They're doing stuff that works better for them because it fits the profile. But now it's not just the profile of what their marketing goals are that they want. Like they want Eberron to have all the monsters so you could use the whole monster manual in Eberron. They didn't want anything like like in Dragonlance where there's no orcs or something like that. That was first. They were thinking of marketing and system first. And in this new world that we live in 2020, what they're thinking of, well, in 2019, I'm hoping 2020 is going to go run a little different, as I'm going to touch on here soon. But in the brave new world of 2019, what they were setting as their priorities was sort of this diversity plus progressive ideology and stuff like that, right? So they don't want a world that looks too colonialist. They don't want a world that looks like it's glorifying, medieval Europe. Why would they want that? That's evil, right? That's evil and white supremacist. So let's not do anything like that. Let's make settings that are full of like furry and non-human races, and have all kinds of these diverse, mostly non-human, but also the humans have to be super diverse. Every other character NPC that they run into has to be in some way diversity quoted, and they and the values have to reflect Seattle 2019 values. So that's why you're not going to see those things. Or see them as a third-party product. Kevin DeJordy says, with Critical Role's campaign setting being published, it's starting to seem more and more like astroturfing. I feel like this deal was made for before the success. Kevin, I don't really agree, because if you look at this, it's very clear that Wizards initially was surprised. They were sidelined by the success of Critical Role and these types of web shows. Their original idea for 5th edition, for what was going to make it really popular, seemed to be like organized play. And I think they were trying to run towards, something which they mentioned earlier in 2019, and which apparently they keep kind of trying to float as a bubble that nobody seems to like. Nobody seems to be really on board with this. But their original marketing idea was to transform D&D into an esport of some kind. And nobody's very into that. But then Critical Role happened and became more and more popular. And they suddenly realized, oh, we're going to miss the boat. And in fact, their first reaction wasn't to bring Critical Role in. It was to try to make their own copies of Critical Role. And you see that on their, what is it? They have like a half dozen shows with a large number of people, usually, bringing in guys, people that I guess complete noobs think are important or relevant, like Chris Perkins, or Satine Phoenix, any of the hot girls that they've that they've got on their staff. Satine Phoenix is extremely talented, right, and very very good at what she does, but she is also hot, right? So they're going to put her on the live stream, and they've kind of done this, tried to make these knockoffs of Critical Role, but none of them have been anywhere close to as successful. So the next stage was that they started to say, well, then we've got to bring Critical Role in, right? Like, I think that they may even have tried to like offer to buy them out or something like that. And I'm guessing that Mercer said no. So then they said, well, let's make a deal. And then Mercer said yes to that, right? Because he's clearly not a stupid man. And he decided that he'd... Craig says that the microphone is cutting out. I'm sorry for anyone who is getting microphone issues. Sometimes, I don't know, my microphone doesn't work all that great here. This phone's getting a bit old. I'm planning to get a new one this year, actually. Sorry, I was going to say next year, but it is going to be early this year sometime. You have to understand, this is a completely amateur production. Kevin says, Pundit is in a Central American treetop jungle house. We should be glad he's able to transmit it all. You know what, Kevin? I think that probably my internet connection is better than a lot of the people watching right now from North America or Europe. Uruguay has really good internet, especially in the capital. My problem is really because I've got a kind of crappy old router. And I've got a phone that is, a little bit old now too, as in it's 2 years old. And, I'm not using professional camera, I'm not using professional microphones or anything of that sort. So there can be lags and things like that happened. I'm not sure. Anyway, let's see what else we've got on the discussion here. Oh, here we go. Greasy says, this is why Pundit writes medieval authentic games. He wants to get rid of technology because it's his weakness. Well, I am completely inept at technology for someone whose, entire job depends on it. I'll have to admit that. But I don't dislike, I love technology, actually. I just suck at it. Gavin DeJoy says, must play a character that is other than human because people bad. Well, yeah, that is a mentality that somehow has been put in today in gaming, right? And that's why they encourage people to play like, I know, birdmen or cat people or, blue skin horn freaks or whatever they are, right? Like, usually, ideally, if they're non-binary or something like that too, right? But this is in part driven by the fundamentally anti-humanist values of the modern left, undoubtedly. I mean, there's no question to me that there's a connection between those two, and it's actually like the opposite of a really good idea in gaming. I mean, except in the sense maybe that all these people are playing these weirdo races act exactly like humans because there's no reference to myth or legend or culture for them to borrow from, except humanity itself. Because these aren't creatures of legend or creatures of myth like elves and dwarves are. I mean, at least with an elf or dwarf, you can tie back to ancient lore, and with some other races, like in Arrows of Indra, I have non-human races like the Gandharvas. But those are something that if you look at Indian myth, you can know about their culture, about the way that they were supposed to be, and about how they were not human. So really, they're just playing humans in drag, right? Humans in cosplay, whatever you want to say about it. It's nothing. It's nothing special or new. But at the same time, just getting to say, well, I have weird skin or I have fur is a way to avoid having a deeper and more profound character, which is why I did a video about this called Your Favorite Race Sucks Unless It's Human. So check it out in the videos if you haven't watched it yet. Valiant Shadow says, CR is often a great gateway, but sets unrealistic expectations. The newest member of our group got interested because of it, but had to learn that most sessions weren't going to be masterpieces. Yeah, well, that's a very common story these days. And I don't deny that, of course, a ton of people have gotten interested in D&D because of Critical Role. A big percentage of those people are only interested in watching Critical Role and other shows like it and not actually playing. Another percentage are interested in playing, but only to recreate Critical Role. But some of those and some of the others that have adopted D&D because of first finding it on Critical Role, those are people that could be turned into long-term consumers of RPGs. But not all of them will, of course. Once Critical Role specifically, and in general, the fad of live stream gaming like this, pro live stream gaming, that's going to go away. There's no question to me. It might not go away entirely. There might still be, 20 years from now, there might still be Critical Role, but it's going to not, it's not going to be nearly what it is today. It's not going to have the same cultural impact. It's a fad, right? So there'll still be people, maybe they'll be interested in that sort of thing, and there might still be some people making it. But I don't know if Mercer will be involved directly or whatever, but I mean, there might still be something called Critical Role, but it won't have the same impact or the same power. Dracopool says, all Snowflake players must have a character of a race not seen anywhere else in the realm. They must be unique. Wizards of the Coast thus panders. It is beyond for another big part of this is the desperate desire of lost children, who are now adults, but they're, still mentally, emotionally, and especially spiritually children, desperate to try to call out their uniqueness without any idea of what their individuation actually is. Because they haven't gone to the underworld to rescue their father. So it's they have no sense of importance. So instead they have to play as some kind of freak Birdman crossdresser in their D&D game. Knights and Legends says Matt Mercer is good at what he does, but he's not a super celeb. If it wasn't for the show, unlikely anyone would remember him other than occasional voiceovers. So remember, nobody who is, idea who I am either, so I'm not saying anything that's meant to be like a diss on him, but he's not a famous actor or director or writer who happens to play D&D. He's just a guy. He's only famous within the D&D hobby because of Critical Role. And yeah, I don't think any of the Critical Role people are particularly good writers or actors or directors. They're just, they just got a hold of this. And it's a niche because it's something that I don't think that you could really find a way for like some big production company to do this bigger in a way that would be better or more appealing to the people that watch. So they can't really take it away from him in that sense. And yet it's something that can be done in this kind of production where you don't expect hugely great production costs and you don't have an expectation of hugely great acting skills involved. So the people are ideal for it. The people that are doing it, Craig Steve says, the longer I play D&D, the more I drift away. I lament the drift away from human-centric origins. I really want to play as Swords and Sorcerers of Hyboria, I think that is. But I can't reasonably ask a group locally to buy the book. Well, Craig, why don't you pick up Lion and Dragon and run that? That's human-centric. You can literally only play humans in it. And it's medieval authentic, and it's got all kinds of stuff out of kind of traditionalist culture. So odds are you'll like it, unless your whole deal is you want to play a barbarian. But then you can still play a Scotsman, Rollstat says, Pundit, I'm curious about your thoughts on retro clones. Well, I've said this a lot of times. To me, retro clones, except for at the very, very beginning where they were kind of a necessary thing, but not as a product, not as a game, but as a product, as something that would make the rules available that weren't in print at that time, but now they all are. Aside from that, they're not really, to me, not really worthwhile. There's no reason to make them. So, and a lot of, at this point, I think we're already at the point where if you're doing like, I'm going to make an OSR game that's basically just like the basic expert set, but I changed one thing. I don't think that's really worthwhile either at this point. Also, I think the thing that is worthwhile is you have a specific genre or setting or context, like, medieval authentic, for example. But I mean, it could be others, I don't know. It could be, I don't know, the Wild West, right? Or it could be, Africa. It could be, hard sci-fi, whatever. And then you remake the old edition rules specifically to that setting or genre in a way that they will really combine in a very effective pattern, right? And along the lines, at the same time, if you want to add certain, particular tweaks to how the D&D rule set works, well, you could do that too, right? I think that's what the OSR is about now and what really works for it. I think it explains the success of my books, at least, and not just mine, but a lot of the other most successful books in the OSR are those kinds of books now. Valiant Shadow asked me, Pundit, what's your ideal player like? When someone sits down at your table, what do you like to see from them the most? Well, the things I want from my player is that they come to every session. That's absolutely number one, because if they come to every session, almost everything else can be kind of forgivable, as long as they aren't completely, socially repellent or unbelievably stupid. I literally one time in all of my history had a gamer that was so, like, he was clearly like severely learning impaired, and I didn't realize at the time he was somebody that a friend of his brought him in and that apologized for it, but the guy clearly had something wrong with him in a very literal medical sense, right? Like a physiological problem or a neurological problem, whatever you want to say it. And it wasn't just that he was autistic. Like, this guy was unbelievable. He's one of the dumbest people I ever met. So obviously that you can't have. But I don't need someone to be hyper intelligent. I don't need someone to be hyper charismatic. I don't need someone to have vast previous experience in role playing. In fact, some of the more annoying players I have are the ones that have had vast previous experience in role playing or in the particular genre I'm setting out. There's nothing worse than playing Star Wars or Forgotten Realms with somebody who's a fanatic of either Star Wars or Forgotten Realms. That's like the nightmare scenario right there. Unless they're really willing to accept that my game isn't going to have any of the lore, the deep lore that they've spent years reading in bad novels. Yeah. So their part that they're not distracted when their character is present in a situation, that they be willing to try out with their character, that they not be demanding constant attention. Those are kind of the key things to me, I think, from a player. But really, I think over time, my games are kind of a forage, right? My campaigns last for like 6 years, right? so I can take, during the course of those years, I can get, like I had one player that came into my Legion campaign, I think like on its 3rd year. And in the time between like the third and the sixth year of the campaign, I made him into from this like literal newbie kid into a really decent gamer, right? And now he like organizes game events and all this stuff, right? So and it's not that I did it because this isn't like one of those 1980s movies about the guy that comes to teach in the poor neighborhood in the school and he changes everyone's lives. I just mean that the game itself, the constant game, and my quality of DMing and the other players' quality of playing will either make someone quit very quickly or will make them rise up to the occasion and get better, because it is in that sense a collective experience. I know that collective is a dirty word for a lot of you too, but fair enough. Buried Axelate says Space Force. Orange Man D&D. That would be a game I would like to see. Unfortunately, it's never going to be made by Wizards. We know that. Ryan Lynn says, my players want to break from D&D. I'm going to throw Starfinder at them. Well, okay. It's your funeral if you want to use Starfinder. Lord Metal Demon says, what resources and supplements would you recommend with regards to the different rights and restrictions between the degrees of social status that you briefly touched on in Lion and Dragon? Well, first of all, in Dark Albion, I expand a bit more with quite a bit more detail on those rights and restrictions. I also talk more about it in I can't tell you offhand which number of RPG events it is, but it's the Medieval Authentic Guide to the Aristocracy, which is not one of the ones that's in the new compilation because it's a later issue. But I also talk about it in the Quarterly Events and Intrigues. I think I talk about it a bit, and in some of the adventures, I kind of run into that context in a very playable level. Like one of the main things, because you don't need to to get a degree in medieval culture studies or something like that to do this right. What you need to know is what are the sumptuary laws? One, which is that you can't go around carrying a sword in the city unless you're a noble, is mentioned in Lion and Dragon. And then what are the kind of customs of marriage and things like that you will find in Lion and Dragon itself, in Dark Albion, and in the Medieval Authentic Aristocracy Guide. And then what you really need to know is about how different social statuses will act towards each other, right? And so you're going to have peasants and villains, that is to say burghers, acting with deference towards knights acting with deference towards nobles, and so on, and how in different and as a DM, the key thing is to think in different contexts about how a person is going to be received. So in all of my adventures in the Pundit Presents series, I say, well, the players are doing this investigation in Cheapside in London, and it's an area full of streetwalkers and stuff like that, and it's a place where if you're going around, you're a cleric, people will probably avoid you. If they can't avoid you, they'll be very deferent, but they probably won't be very honest with you. If you're a noble, they might try to rob you if you're unescorted, but if you look tough or what have you, then they're just going to try to also avoid or ignore you. They're not going to give you answers. They're not going to tell you where to get something, not in the area that is lower class. And so meanwhile, if your character is a Kimry or thief or something like that, then yes, then he will be able to do well there. Whereas you're going to see kind of the exact inverse situation if they're going to the house of an earl, to the manor of an earl. And I think that's one of the main things you have to check out, right? I'd suggest if you're looking for kind of general text, do a Google search for social classes in the medieval period and start from there, because I could recommend you really dry academic books, but I don't think that that's really the right way to go about this. It'll take a bit of research, is all. Uh, Gracie Smith says, build a wall around the Gith and make them pay for it. Damn right. Um, Looking for other comments here. Bradford says, they may have been surprised by Critical Role, but they leaned into it hard after the fact. Yes, they certainly did, without a doubt. I mean, that's exactly my point. They kind of missed it right off the bat, but then they started doing all this stuff, and then they were hoping, I think, that their official stuff, their official shows, were going to be more popular than Critical Role, because they had the celebrities as they imagined, right? Because a lot of people ask Perkins or Crawford questions on Twitter. Tiny group of people do that. they figured that'll probably work, and no, it didn't. So then they went on to like make a devil's bargain with Matt Mercer. Buried Axeblade says, Satine Phoenix is top tier D&D watching. She does so many home rules that I use. Yeah. I was going to say, I don't understand how she's still working there, but I guess she ended up selling out some of her friends in certain ways. She towed the party line, and I guess that was enough of a sacrifice to keep her there, at least for now. I think I'm way behind on the comments here anyways. Kalishkova says, I'm always a bit surprised how much of the Critical Role audience clearly have zero experience with D&D outside the show. Well, actually you shouldn't be. Like, there were live streams of people's actual play long before there was Critical Role. I think that there were live streams of actual play like as far back as 10 years ago. None of them were popular, right? The Critical Role became popular with a crowd of people that were connected to this kind of group, that also were a Hollywood crowd, that were a crowd that were very savvy with social media. They knew how to promote it. They were doing a professional production. They weren't actually just playing a game. They were doing improv acting that looks like playing a game. So it's completely different than, any four slobs in Wisconsin playing a D&D game and filming it. It was nothing like that. It was the exact opposite. And so they created a crowd of people, many of whom have never played D&D and have no, and I think, what is it, half of them, more than half? They did a study about this, but I don't remember what the exact result was. But a huge number of them not only have never played D&D, but have no intention of ever playing D&D and are not particularly interested in D&D. They're interested in Critical Role. They don't really care. That same group are tied with the group that don't really care if that the D&D, the parts about the D&D rules, they're not there for that. They're there for the drama of the improv show. Live stream gaming is straight up boring to watch. Yes, I certainly agree with that. It is boring to watch. I would never film it. I'd never inflict it on people. Unlike my other two co-hosts from Inappropriate Characters. But there we are. We're allowed to disagree, I guess. This is an interesting point here. Nicholas Taylor says, I think that recruiting people and getting them straight into the OSR is easier by far than trying to convert a 5e player. Well, you're probably right, but it's easier to, it's harder to find people in order to bring them into the OSR directly. Whereas there are lots of 5e players. And so you don't need to get every 5e person into the OSR. You just need a small percentage of those. So yeah, of course, if there's someone you don't know who's interested in role-playing games, they've never played a game in their life, and you want to start them off on, say, Lion and Dragon, excellent role-playing game, then you can do that, right? But it's not going to be nearly as common as running into someone who's played some D&D already, and that D&D is probably at this point 5th edition, which they played, unless they're very old. Gracie Smith says, how do you feel about race as class, pundit? Well, if you've got demi-humans, I kind of like race as class. I mean, I like it the other way too. It works the same. To me, it's the same. I don't have a strong opinion about it. I think that either works. Race as class ends up acting in a way that is more archetypal. That means that all the people of this race are like this, and so that's useful for archetypal races. It works very well for elves and dwarves, for example. Felix says, great channel. Thank you very much, Felix. What are your thoughts on Symbaroum or Forgotten Lands? I have no strong opinions whatsoever on those two. I'm sorry. Megabuster Shepherd says, dwarves are just small, angry Scotsmen. Change my mind. Michael Herrera says, I prefer dwarves as Scandinavian rather than Scot. Very good. David M says, not true. Dwarves don't eat enough oats to be Scot. Well, it is a great and eternal question about dwarves. I don't know. In my DCC campaign, the dwarves are all, very tough-ass, grumpy warriors that have, they have a book of grievances, which is something I kind of, borrowed from somewhere. I don't remember. Is it Warhammer? I don't know. I don't know where the idea of the book of grievances is from. And they all speak in these Yiddish accents. So there you are. Kevin DeJordy says, hashtag kill Catboy. Well, Catboy, I hate to tell you, as of Sunday, is still alive. He's still somehow escaping the hangman. He was captured by the Anti-Bill Vigilance Committee, but then he was let go when he very, very willingly and with zero need for any kind of intimidation or torture betrayed Bill and told them where Bill's phylactery was. So he's once again escaped. He's there. I don't think a session goes by where Catboy isn't in danger of his life, but yet it still keeps on surviving. Somebody asked me, why don't you write a Norse OSR game? I don't know if that was that directed at me. I don't find the Norse all that interesting, to be honest. I mean, I like their Norse, mythology and kind of the religious history. I think runes are really interesting. Those of you who know about my writings on the occult know that among many things that I've worked with are the runes. But I've always been a bigger fan of civilization than barbarity. So, I prefer to write about civilizations. So I think it's way more exciting to have a game setting based on epic mythical India or, medieval authentic Europe or England specifically, but it could be Europe as a whole, than, the land of fjords where there's a bunch of hairy tribesmen fighting other hairy tribesmen. Sorry. Unscripted Unchained says, Pundit, what other TSR games deserves the OSR treatment? I'm not sure really what you mean. I think the OSR treatment as such is something. OSR is something that is basically about D&D. And there are only a handful of other TSR games, and none of them I think are mechanically especially good. So yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Somebody with the name in Cyrillic says, "Dear RPG Pundit, we are 3 weeks into Lion and Dragon campaign, and so far we love it. Thank you for such a brilliant game." Thank you very much. I'm very happy to hear about that. That's wonderful. I always love it when people tell me that they bought my product. I especially love it when they tell me that they played my products and are enjoying them. Roll Stats says, "I bought Lion and Dragon and I love it. You had me on page 1 with the setting assumptions. I'm having a hard time getting my players to buy into the new magic system. How would you sell it?" Well, what I would sell is that a magician in Lion and Dragon, a magister, first of all, he's not just a wizard. He's a lore master, right? And what you have to tell him is, look, if what you liked about magicians in standard D&D is that they're the ones that have the ability to cast quickly on the fly in specific situations, then you probably want them to play a cleric instead, because clerical magic still more or less works like that. And if you get a high enough level as a cleric, you can directly just call down divine intervention and, make the wrath of God fall on someone. So that's the people, in the medieval world, miracles work fast. Magic is basically, you have to do some cheating. You have to do a whole bunch of well, actually, it's kind of, you can always say it's the opposite. Miracles are supernatural. Magic is natural philosophy. You're manipulating the elements of the world to make an effect. So magicians, magisters in Lion and Dragon, at low level, what they are mainly is masters of knowledge. And you as a DM have a responsibility to make sure that knowledge can be viably useful in certain ways, right? Which, I mean, I guess it'll depend a bit on just what your campaign is about. But, a +1 bonus to something like history in Lion and Dragon means your character knows a whole bunch of historical facts that none of the other characters should know, right? And same thing with whatever, natural philosophy, occultism, any of those things. Occultism in the game is basically, lets you identify monsters and identify magic items. So that in itself is an important characteristic, right? And then the magical techniques that they learn are techniques that are going to require time and money, and you have to prepare stuff beforehand. But the more time you spend doing that and the more that you prepare, the more badass you become. Because then, like, once you have a talisman or whatever, that talisman works forever. Once you have a blasting wand, it works forever. You have all kinds of stuff that you will then be able to use as a kind of artificing that will let you be really effective. And so you have to, the difference is the magister has to think and plan ahead of time. That's how I would sell them on it. Also, if you get them the old school companion, there'll be a whole bunch of additional magic stuff. And in some of the later episodes of issues of RPG Pundit Presents, there's a whole bunch of additional stuff in there, which is, I think, really useful for supplementing the magister's abilities. Like the grimoire magic, for that to be useful, you have to have the grimoire somewhere in that setting. But if the character goes looking for stuff like that, he should be able to find it and he should be able to learn it. And you should, as the DM, should let him learn it, because that's part of, how the magister advances. So, all the grimoires, the tarot, advanced techniques for astrology. I think enchantment and glamour, I don't think are in the new source book, but they're in their own issues of RPG Pundit Presents. I think they came out after issue 50. I'm not sure. The path of trees and all of that sort of stuff, medieval folk magic. So there's tons of stuff that came out in the RPG Pundit Presents stuff that helps you ramp up the magic level as little or as much as you want, depending on how available you want those additional techniques to be. But yeah, that's the thing. If what you want is to be able to call down fireball, lightning, or whatever from the heavens, or to, cure someone who's on the verge of death without having to prepare a potion or something, then you want to play a cleric. Lord Metal Demon says, question, since you worked as a consultant on 5th edition, what do you foresee as the next iteration of D&D? Do you think Wizards is already working on 6th edition, or are they going to milk the success of 5th edition? Well, first I can tell you, as a person who consulted on 5th edition, at the time when we were making 5th edition, the understanding was, the idea was that this was to be an evergreen product, right? Like that was we knew that it probably wouldn't, but the concept was not just in the production of the rules, but also in kind of how the plans of what you were going to release or not. The whole notion, and certainly what I was pushing there, was that theoretically 5th edition could be something that would last, forever as the edition of D&D. And part of this involved avoiding the errors of 3rd edition of releasing a ton of books that created rules bloat and supplement bloat. And you'll see that 5th edition hasn't done that. 5th edition has only focused on releasing like adventure content, whatever additional material they've come out. I don't know about the last few books because I haven't been paying too much attention, I'll be honest. But up until the last few books, at least I can say that the material that they've come out with, none of it ends up amping up the power level. None of it ends up bloating the rules systems themselves. And this was all intentional. And the releases aren't as many as you saw in 3rd edition, where they would release a ton of stuff on a very frequent basis, whereas Wizards officially is only releasing a few products a year. And then they have, the DMs Guild with a bunch of stuff that isn't official product. So there was never an original lifespan for D&D, for 5th edition D&D. It was meant to theoretically be able to go on for as long as Wizards would allow it to, as long as it stuck to the plan. And it kind of so has, right? Stuck to the plan, I mean. I think right now, 5th edition is at a huge level of success, and I think they would be really monumentally stupid. Now, it can happen because corporations can be monumentally stupid, but they would be monumentally stupid to try to release a 6th edition now. Because I would hope that that they'll have figured out that it is not a good idea to bring out a whole new edition at a moment of peak activity. Focus on getting other stuff out. Stick to what's working. Because anytime you release a new edition, you will lose a significant percentage of the people that were involved in the previous edition, that were customers of the previous edition. And the more popular the previous edition, the larger that percentage of loss is going to be. So you do not want to do that right now. Charlotte Williams says, have you made any progress on the Theater of the Mind how-to video I requested? Well, I don't have videos. I'm not sure what you mean by the question, Charlotte, but I'm not the kind of guy that I have 3 other videos waiting in production or something like this. I am flying by the seat of my pants here. However, what I can tell you is I really like that idea. It is one of the things that will be one of my future videos. I can't tell you exactly when, but it is on the little list I have of stuff to make videos about. So just so you know, we are definitely not Critical Role here. This is not high production values, and I'm not a trained actor. So there's nothing, there's no progress yet, really, because there's never any progress on any of my videos until the moment I record it. And if it's not a live stream, it gets uploaded as soon as I've recorded it, because that's just the way I do it. I'm not putting, this is the RPG Pundit literally putting 0 effort in terms of production values into his YouTube channel. So luckily, you guys still seem to love me, and I thank you for that. See what else people have written, and if not, I'll get back to talking about CR. Snowman says, maybe Catboy is destined to be level 10. Yeah, well, it's frighteningly possible. They're getting up there. I mean, Bill the Elf is almost level 10. He's really close now. He's going to get there. And then I will create the immortal rules for DCC. Snowman says, why not make an Egyptian game or a Babylonian game? Well, I might someday. The Egyptians are kind of cool. The Babylonians are also quite cool. There is a really good Babylonian-themed RPG that is unfortunately in Spanish, made by Spaniards. So unless you're a Spanish speaker, you won't be able to make use of it. I think it's called Puertas de Ishtar. Yeah, it's just not top priority right now. I think probably the next, if I do more products along those lines for us, probably my next products will be either about the anarchy period in England, so it'll be like a kind of another, I guess it'll be a prequel, you could say, till Dark Albion, or it'll be about the Crusades, which will drive a lot of people absolutely batshit. Oh, I've lost my place here. Here we are. Fred Daniel just said, I keep hoping you will do a medieval authentic crusade setting game. Well, you are almost certainly going to get your wish. I just can't say when. Right now, I'm still working on the Pundit Presents stuff and working on the compilations. And there's a chance that my next product won't be anything like those. It'll be something very different. But I don't think I want to dish about that just yet. Okay, Kashko says, so on the stream topic, where is the idea of the fall of CR coming from? Well, no, Wizards has not bought out CR like Braid Axeblade says. Wizards has just made a deal with them, and they're publishing the CR setting book and all of that sort of thing. And what we've seen in reaction to that is, of course, a huge amount of social media gushing over the CR book coming out, and the general praise from all the critters, as they call themselves. And we've also seen what has always accompanied CR hand in hand, which has been this kind of disgustingly cloying social justice stuff that always seems to be attacking what was before, right? But just standard operating procedure for social justice warriors. But it's particularly egregious because they're dealing with a bunch of people who have never played D&D before, and they're creating this entirely fake history, right? It's like if you said, someone was a new, immigrant to Canada, and you had leftists in Canada saying, well, slavery was legal here until 1980. Like, that's not true. That's not true at all, right? And so what we had, for example, was that you had one of these feminist D&D people came out with a tweet saying, oh, I would much rather play D&D with some Critical Role fans than with gamers who have been playing games for 15 years now, but saying that that women shouldn't play D&D, right? Well, that implies, first of all, that those sorts of people exist. They mostly do not. That implies that it's common anyways, and it is certainly not common. That it implies that there was this kind of terrible prejudice against women in D&D as a hobby until Critical Role came around to create the new Glorious Revolution. And that's abject nonsense, right? In fact, if anything, before Critical Role came around, there was discrimination by women against D&D. And what Critical Role did is it didn't make D&D safe for women. It made D&D feel acceptable to get the approval of women to play it. But even before that, there was a huge percentage of women, a huge percentage of female players of D&D. Just not, it's not a majority then. It's not a majority now either. But this idea that until CR came along, you had women were persecuted in D&D tables everywhere that they were found. Men didn't want to play with them or stuff like that. It's just completely ridiculous. And here's where my point about the belief that this is maybe a sign that CR's power is starting to wane is that the reaction to that comment, for example, was more powerfully against it than for it. And there was, with this, a reaction against the idea that critters are somehow better D&D people when most of them don't even play D&D than people who have always played D&D, or than people that have come into D&D by other ways, right? This idea, there's been this big backlash against the kind of smug moral superiority, this progressive Californian superiority that CR has as a movement. I don't mean the CR people themselves, though of course they've certainly shown that in the past, including the kind of this, particularly Los Angelino style of fake niceness that Mercer
shows off on a routine basis. He's like, well, the sort of thing where he says like, oh, I feel really sorry for people who, who voted for Trump. We have to understand them, and I hope that they get the therapy they need, right? Like this kind of completely passive aggressive shit posting of people that don't think like him, where it sounds like he's being super spiritual and super compassionate, man, but he's actually just basically being the same kind of totalitarian, Stalinist that all the rest of them are, right? He's literally wishing people into mental hospitals. He's wanting, he would hope that anyone who doesn't think like him would be sent to re-education camps, right? It's exactly the same. So these people have now gotten a bigger backlash than I ever saw before, right as their book is coming out, right? So my feeling is that just like a whole bunch of other stuff that's coming up from in early 2020, it definitely looks like we are turning the corner on the influencing power of the SJW movement. And I think you can see this in a lot of areas. It's not over. I'm not saying this is the end. I'm not even saying this is the beginning of the end, right? But this is maybe the beginning of the end, right? That we're at the start of this real pushback where people are just sick of it. And it'll be especially devastating when they lose massively in November in the elections. Just like in the UK, it's already been devastating for them when Labour had the biggest loss it has had in, 90 years. This was a very, very serious blow to them that showed them just how unpopular they are. And it showed kind of the mushy middle of people that, the ones that tended maybe to vote Labour, maybe tend to vote Democrat, the ones that, that don't think Hillary was awful, but, they also don't, they've kind of been going along because they don't want to be called racists or sexist or homophobic. So they've been going along with what these people have been demanding, thinking that this is the majority view. And now suddenly the mushy middle watches this and they're like, well, hang on. These guys aren't the majority view. Nobody likes them. They only like themselves. They're 8% of the population, and the other 92% despise them, right? So this is starting to turn around. And you're even seeing this in some media where, really interesting phenomenon happened just now with Doctor Who. I'm going to come out and say that I am not an obsessive fandom style nerd of almost anything, right? Like I like Star Trek, I like Star Wars, I like comics, I like a lot of the nerd stuff, but in none of them am I one of these like obsessive guys. I've never had to have every issue of the comic in mint condition. I never collected toys, at least not as an adult. I mean, I had action figures as a little kid, right? But I never, as an adult, I've never bought a figurine of something or anything like that. I despised the endless Star Wars and Star Trek and Forgotten Realms novels and all of that C-grade literary garbage, right? And I didn't even buy the Doctor Who novels. But in every other respect, if there's one thing I was a mad fanatic about, it was Doctor Who. It was really like, when I discovered it as a kid, it was the show that most appealed to me. It was, it's something that I've always loved. For longer, it's been an older love for me than D&D. I discovered Doctor Who, I think maybe a year before I discovered D&D, and I've been crazy about it ever since. And after watching the last episode, not the one that just came out, I guess, because I haven't seen that one and I don't plan to, and that's an incredible statement for me to say. Because after watching the one last week, I said, well, forget it. This isn't Doctor Who at all anymore. It's literally not worth watching. It's not worth watching in any respect. It is complete ideological garbage, right? It's just it's a show that has been devoured, like some of those parasites that can go into bugs and eat them completely away on the inside and then use their brains and they're like zombie bugs now. Well, that's what Doctor Who is. Doctor Who is now, in its current incarnation, a zombie show. It has the physical, some of the, it's really rotting away at this point, but it retains some of the physical characteristics of Doctor Who, but in every other respect, it is just a living dead show meant to act only as a vehicle for extremist ultra left progressive ideas, right? That's all they're doing with it in a really, really terrible way. Because some people say, oh, well, Doctor Who has always had political messages and it's always kind of been left leaning, right? Yeah, but like it was never in a situation where you were bashing people over the head with the ideology above everything and paid no attention to plot or continuity or anything else. The whole point of the show, like in this last show, literally, Doctor Who, she turns and looks at the camera and tells you that you're a bad person for not recycling, right? Like it's that blatant and stupid, right? And yes, there's always been kind of political metaphor in Doctor Who. In fact, one of my favorite periods of Doctor Who was the Pertwee years, the late 70s, the third Doctor and the very early period of the fourth Doctor. The people in charge of Doctor Who were literal card-carrying members of the Communist Party, right? But they also knew how to write really good stories. And so they made stories that had very interesting, very sophisticated storytelling, sci-fi elements with messages that made metaphorical reference to real-life issues of the time that are still in some ways very relevant today. I mean, there was 2 or 3 episodes in the period of the third Doctor and the fourth Doctor that were environmental messages in a time when environmentalism was very early. There were messages in it about colonialism. There were messages in it about racism, right? But all of these things were done in a way where you could say, yeah, this is a political topic that they're covering, but they're presenting a point of view. They're not bashing you over the head with it. They're not sacrificing every other detail of the show for it, right? They're making it as you make sci-fi, right? And so you might agree or disagree with the entirety of the message, but you can accept it because it's still being done in the form of a story that is very well made and entertaining. None of that, modern SJWs are literally incapable of that. They just can't do it because they haven't been effectively trained in anything. They don't have sufficient training in school in literary styles. They don't have training in the concept of symbolism. They just don't understand symbolism. They are lacking something that is so fundamentally human and in every other culture. They cannot process the hero's journey because they can't process more basic symbols. They're a ruined generation. It's just horrifying. But anyway, so I think that's it for me as far as Doctor Who is concerned, right? But the very interesting thing that I've seen happen is that there was a huge backlash, and there had been a backlash already from the previous season among the fans. But in the previous season, a year back, when they introduced the female Doctor, who, I mean, I don't think, I've heard that the actress herself is very woke and has been demanding extreme wokeness, so in that sense, she's bad. I'm not saying that a female Doctor Who is bad. I think that if you had a woman Doctor but we're still doing it with the same quality of production and the same quality of stories as you saw earlier in the new series, there would be absolutely no problem with the woman Doctor Who. Not at all. I mean, it's still logical. It's not like a woman James Bond. It's different. It's not the same thing, right? But anyways, last season when they introduced a woman into the show, when they made all these episodes that were clearly just meant to be woke virtue signaling and bashing you in the head with ideology, what you saw was very typical of 2019, which was that all the nerds, right, said this is garbage. And then absolutely all of the media relating, like the websites, television websites, feminist websites, nerd websites, and some print and everything, all went and said, oh, you guys are the problem. You're misogynist. You just don't like it because she's a woman, right? This show is great, right? We're giving it 100%. It's magnificent. It's the best season of Doctor Who ever. Right, and that was the reaction. You saw that reaction all over the place, right? To the point that it's become like a meme, right? And nowadays you go on Rotten Tomatoes, anything that has 100% critic rating, is going to be absolute garbage. It's just going to be horrible, and especially if it's got an audience rating that's low, and anything that has 100% or a really high audience rating, and that the critics hate is going to be great, right? Because that's how it goes. So that was in the last season, but now in this season, literally last episode they lost 1 million viewers, right? And I think that some of the media has realized where the wind is blowing, because what you saw in reaction to this last episode, there were some websites that have been for a long time progressive leaning, but that aren't absolutely 100% SJW based, right? That they think they can retreat effectively, have said, no, wait, this show is actually garbage, right? That they've written against it, they've said things against it. Whereas only those websites that are 100%, that are clearly like, if they're not SJW, they have no reason for existing. Those websites have said, no, on the contrary, it's still not woke enough. Like, which, if you will see how woke this last episode was, it would be hard to imagine just how much woker it could possibly get. But there you are. But this means that there is a block of people in the kind of more moderate area of the left that is really looking for a way to get rid of these goddamn radicals that they realize now they've made captains of a ship that these people are sinking for them, right? Like they are going to be their own destruction. So I think 2020 is going to be the year where all kinds of that sort of stuff gets turned around. And now Critical Role itself is not something that has to be super woke and super SJW or anything like that. And in fact, from what little I've seen, I haven't seen a lot of whole episodes of CR, but I've seen a few. It's not overt, unless they've changed recently. I haven't watched it the last few months, but in general, from what I've seen, it's not overt bashing you on the head with ideological messages. It's just that the people around it, both the actors and people involved in their social media, and some of the loudest fans who have decided to hitch the social justice wagon to CR with posts like this one that this woman made about how CR is what has brought diversity into D&D, and before that D&D was a misogynist hellhole, full of, I don't know, rape gangs or something like that. I don't know what they think it was, right? But there you are. Those people have stuck themselves onto CR parasitically. And I think Matt Mercer is too much of a true believer, or at least some of the people around him are, that they couldn't disavow, right? They're not going to do that. And so they are going to let, I think, the virtue signaling crowd drag them down. And the real question is whether Wizards will, because Matt Mercer is not owned by Wizards, right? He's his own deal, and he's probably going to choose to, suicide by virtue signaling rather than continue to be a viable product. But Wizards is owned by Hasbro. And I think there is going to come a point where Hasbro is going to say, just like you're going to see all the big movie theaters, like all the big movie companies, you're going to see any large corporation that has been letting the SJWs run amok because the SJWs have taken over important positions in the middle management and have promised the people up higher, and the corporate people and the money people have promised them that going woke was what was going to be the big success of this decade. And they're now realizing that that's not true. They've looked at Star Wars, the SJW trilogy, and seen how Admiral Gender Studies and her friends have destroyed Star Wars, except for The Mandalorian, the one thing that all the SJWs said was going to be a garbage show and that they shouldn't pay any attention to. And it turns out to be the thing that saves Star Wars, right? So they're looking at that, They're looking at the people that said the Ghostbusters all-women movie was going to be the greatest hit in the century, and how that went down, versus, how the Joker went down, who all those same people said was terrible and should be outlawed as a movie, and it's got 11 Oscars, or 11 Oscar nominations anyway. And at some point, the people that are really, ruthlessly into money are going to say, no, the hell with this. We're going to call the purge, right? And they're going to wipe out entire departments of people, fire whole divisions, and replace them with people that they don't think are insane with, woke disease and Trump derangement syndrome. And I think that that's going to happen with Wizards of the Coast. Right. I think that that's what Mike Mearls has been desperately holding out on. He's like in hiding. You haven't seen him do almost any social media posting because the SJWs are desperate for his head. They really want to get him fired and replaced with Jeremy Crawford, who is one of them. He's somebody that would drive D&D into the ground, which is what they really want, right? Because they want to drive all elements of popular Western culture to the ground as part of the bigger plan of deconstructing, by which means destroying Western civilization. Right? So if they can get a guy like Crawford in charge, then that's going to be a very important tool for them. But Mike has been like desperately hiding himself. I don't know. He's hiding under his desk or something, trying to hold out long enough for the people at Hasbro to change the way the wind is blowing. Because right now, if he says something, they would eat him alive, right? Because right now, those people still have the power. But I think very soon they're going to stop having that power. We're seeing this more and more. And I suspect probably the real end is going to be November 2020. In November 2020, when Trump wins, the left is going to just go absolutely insane. They're going to go nuts for 2 or 3 months. And then at the end of that, they're going to be completely disavowed by any of the middle. And that'll be it. That'll be the end of that. And, the Democratic Party will probably get rid of them all if they can. For example, if they can't, then you're going to end up seeing the Democratic Party turn into a rump party much worse than Labor. They're going to be in huge trouble. But we'll see about that. But anyways, culturally, I think that'll be the end of their power. Shortly into 2021. We've got about a year to go, people. That's what I think. Anyways, more comments here. By the way, from Redstone. By the way, just got Lion and Dragon and Dark Albion in PDF. Awesome game. Can't wait to try it. Thank you so much, Redstone. I really appreciate that. I love hearing about that. And please let me know how your game with it goes. Whoops. Lost my place here. I'm trying to answer everybody, but maybe I shouldn't even bother. Maybe I should just try to get back to the top here. I don't know. I can't believe we've got 69 people watching right now. That's a good number. Oh, damn. Just went down to 68. Oh, well. Snowman says, so what do characters get for being level 10 in your DCC game? Well, they don't get anything. But theoretically, that's the highest level in DCC. But I'm going to basically give them a path to immortality in the style of the old Rule Cyclopedia rules, the ones from the old box sets or from, the RC. So that once they get to level 10, they might have to do some incredibly difficult, incredibly long and challenging quest, if they so desire, that will lead them to become, either immortals or daemon patrons or something like that. Steve Park says, if you do the Crusades, would you do Christians versus Muslims, or would you do the Church of the Unconquered Sun versus Frogmen? No, it would be Christian versus Muslims. And even in the Dark Albion setting, where I kind of like filed the names off and replaced it from the Church of the Unconquered Sun is just Christianity with the name slightly changed, right? Even there, when I talk about the lands of the Sultanate, there it's the followers of the Crescent Moon, so that's meant to be the Muslims. But I think that the age for that sort of stuff is done, and from here on in, I'm just gonna openly make them be Christians and Muslims in the setting, and I think it would be quite interesting. Happy Bear says, Mona Lisa was created by a trans Native American. Is that right? I was not aware of that, Happy Bear. Kevin Jordy says, I can't say I've ever met anyone who has ever said women shouldn't play D&D. I haven't either. I have met let me make this clear, in about 30 years worth of role playing, I have met, I think, one person who said, I don't want to play on a table where there's a girl, right? And it's like the most hideously socially deformed nerd you could imagine, right? Like he was somebody who was at a gaming club and nobody wanted to play with him, like in the university, right? And so like nobody wanted to play with this guy. So this is not in any way, this idea that there was like always this terrible discrimination against women in D&D groups is just nonsense. Kalashkova says, yes, The idea that old school nerds from the 80s who were social outcasts were in fact the ones forcing all the cool kids out of the hobby somehow. Yeah. LM Lil says, does your medieval authentic setting have a medieval authentic cosmology? I read C.S. Lewis's scholarly book, The Discarded Image, and the medieval view of the cosmos was fascinating. Well, it does, in fact, have a medieval authentic cosmology, but Lion and Dragon itself doesn't go into enormous details about that cosmology, but it is, in every respect, a world that fits the medieval authentic paradigm, the way that medieval people understood the world to work, right? And that this is the world as they knew it, and how they believed it. So the magic is all based on on actual writings about magic, either from like literal grimoires, or from accounts of magicians doing things, or from folk tales and stories about magicians doing things. I go somewhat more into cosmology in some of the Pundit Presents material, and even the astrology, for example, in the advanced astrology issue of Pundit Presents, which is in the new old school companion, the medieval authentic astrology shows you stuff that was what real medieval astrologers did and how they did it. You know, mechanized for OSR and simplified enormously, but it is that, right? It's not modern astrology, which is completely different. Mr. Triceratops makes a very good point. He says, Critical Role made it acceptable to other women that women should be able to play D&D. Guys never cared. Yeah, not only did guys never care, but almost any gaming table I was ever in, and I think the vast majority of gaming tables over the years, period, would have been very happy to have a woman playing in their group. Right, if they didn't have one. In fact, my games have had women playing in it for ages. Right, I've got today in the present day, I have women in several of my gaming groups. Not every gaming group right now, but a lot of them. But what was true about women is that other women, if you were a girl in the 80s or 90s and you played RPGs, you know. They even talked about, like the Queen Bee syndrome, right? Like the nerds would be fawning over you. They'd be, super happy. Very klutzy advances and in some cases inappropriate behavior. But that's the opposite of them not wanting you there, right? That's them not knowing how to interact with a girl. That's a different story. But the people that would mock you if you were a girl who played D&D were the popular girls, right? And so now this is the popular girls saying, well, we're going to play D&D right now because it's fashionable. And so we're going to pretend that it wasn't us who were shitting all over D&D for the last 20 years. We're going to pretend that it was the D&D players themselves who never wanted us. And that the women who played D&D before us don't exist. Just like we would have wished they never existed before anyways, because we didn't like them because they played D&D instead of doing the things we told them to do. So that's what's happening here. It's an erasure of the women who have been playing D&D for the last 50 years, or 40 some years, 46 years, I guess it is, that have been playing D&D for the last 40 years. All of those women have been erased by the modern SJWs and by the popularity hogs, right? The women that are now into D&D because being a nerd is fashionable and cute or whatever. It's geeky, it's hipster, whatever you want to call it. They've eliminated those women from history, and they've created this fake history where it was the nerdy boys who are the all-powerful gatekeepers. And of course, social justice theory serves this, right? It says a nerdy kid in junior high was somehow more powerful than the popular cheerleader because he's a white male and the cheerleader is a white female, right? And we all know that means that inherently his white privilege meant that he could oppress her, but she couldn't oppress him. So obviously, if she didn't feel like playing D&D, it was because he was somehow oppressing her for it. which I think covers in a nutcase why all of that, in a nutshell, why the people who promote those theories are all nutcases. It's just insane. If you think that any time in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the nerds had more privilege than any other group in high school, you're completely wrong. I mean, even by the 90s, if you were like in cities anyways, maybe not in the country, but in cities, if you were like a fashionable gay kid, you were more likely to be accepted by the popular crowd than if you were a D&D nerd. You know? Kalishkova says, can't remember where, but I read something about it being discrimination not to call fans of the shows gamers, even if they don't play games. Well, you might have heard it really in relation to me, because that's something I said way, like really in the early period of this channel. So in some of my earliest videos, I pointed out that there's a whole bunch of people that are calling themselves gamers who've never played at all, period. But because they like CR, they're D&D gamers. They're part of the D&D community, they call themselves, even though they don't actually play D&D and don't ever want to play D&D. But somehow, if you don't call them gamers of the D&D community, then you're the one who is being a gatekeeper, right? If you don't give them the power to decide for you what kind of products should be made of a game that they don't play and never want to play, then you're the one that's being discriminating. And when I fought back against that was like one of the biggest SJW assaults against me. Well, the biggest one since Consultant Gate probably happened as a result of that, which is really funny to me. Jim Bob says, turn your attention to Virginia tomorrow, push back in the only way it matters. Well, I wish luck to everybody in Virginia that's fighting for their constitutional rights. Going to be curious how it turns out. You know, it's like Tim Pool said, if something's going to start the boogaloo, it's going to be what's going on in Virginia. Pretty frightening. LM Lil says, I think SJWs are losing their transgressive sheen because they have too much power in the cathedral. Well, yeah, well, and certainly they can be seen as victims of their own success. But I don't think it's the rest of the cathedral, as you put it, that is turning on them. I think it's the old establishment is trying to turn on them. You know, in the same way that, you know, Nancy Pelosi would love to get rid of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? Like these are the Blairites would love to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, right? They had to surrender to these people because they knew that without them they couldn't win. But then once they surrendered to these people started purging them and are now dominating their own parties, and this is a big problem. So sure, yeah, the establishment would to some degree love to get rid of some of these fanatics that are their own Frankenstein monsters. But I think more importantly, what you're having now, I think what's really happening is that the Zoomers are starting to come of age. And you have the first generation of kids where all of the authority figures in their lives, for all of their lives, from their whole schooling, every single establishment authority figure that ruled over them, that told them what they had to like, what they had to think, and what they had to hate. It wasn't a Baptist minister, it wasn't a church lady, it wasn't, you know, some evil Reagan voting school administrator, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't the right. It wasn't any aspect of the right. You had people trying to ban their books and their video games and the comics and the YouTube channels that they like, the YouTube celebrities that they like PewDiePie. That wasn't, you know, the Baptist Moral Decency League or the Republican Party. It was the left. It was the SJWs, right? They are a generation that has grown up under the thumb of the progressive left, and they've hated it. And now you're going to see this big counterculture emerge that has no remaining trappings of the counterculture I grew up with, which was a counterculture where the people trying to censor my stuff when I was a kid were all of the right. Yeah, and the left were the guys that were helping me fight for what I liked. So obviously, there's a whole bunch of people today that still have qualms, that still have resistance to opposing a left that for a long time was their ally, or thinking better of a right that today is much more free speech than the left is, because the right still brings up memories of the, how that the minister in their church tried to convince their parents to take their D&D books away or something like that, right? So they still have that visceral reaction. These kids don't have that. All of those people on the right had completely lost power by the time these kids were at the age of reason. And for the entire school age, the people telling them how to live, the people dominating their lives have all been on the progressive left. So they have no instinctive reaction against the right, and they have all the rebellious nature that young people always have is directed to the people that have dominated them until now, who have all been on the left. And I think that is the way in which the SJWs are starting to lose it. Lord Metal Demon says, question, have you ever considered authoring adventures or other content at DCC? Not official stuff. I don't know. Goodman Games is pretty nice. They're pretty good people. So I don't want to say that they wouldn't give me a license to do stuff. I don't really like working under licenses anyways. And I think that probably if they did give me a license, it would probably cause them some trouble because the SJWs would go after them. So why put them in that sort of a situation? So I don't know one way or the other. I've never seriously considered it. They've never approached me, but I wouldn't expect them to. But instead what I've done is, half of the RPG Pundit Presents products, all the Gonzo products of RPG Pundit Presents have come directly out of my DCC campaign. And they're made so that you can use them with any OSR product, but you are definitely able to use them with DCC because they were created in a long-term DCC campaign. So any of the Gonzo products, which are, again, about half of the RPG Pundit Presents products, technically speaking, are unlicensed products that were evolved out of a Dungeon Crawl Classics campaign. Buried Axplay says, hey, there are only 20 of us in the chat, but 70 watching. Maybe we can tell the listeners to try the chat. Well, listeners, if you haven't tried the chat, feel free to try the chat. Don't feel obliged. I'll tell you the cool stuff that's on the chat if for some reason or another you don't want to be chatting. I think a lot of people, I know that I do this with YouTube. I don't know if you do, but I know a lot of people do. I put on YouTube usually when I'm doing other stuff. So I'm typing on my computer, I'm preparing lunch, I'm doing whatever, and I've got YouTube running on the background. And a lot of times I'm not even looking at the screen. And I think my channel is really good for that because my screen never has anything interesting except on rare occasions when my cats show up, which they haven't tonight. I think it's too hot for them. They're just laying around, But on the whole, that's kind of what you've got here. My channel could very well be like basically a podcast, right? So you just have to have it on and you're listening in the background. So I think the people that aren't using the live chat out of the people watching are probably people that don't want to have to type anything because they're not really looking at the screen and typing and participating in that sense as they go along. They're watching and listening to me talk while they're doing other stuff. Bradford says, if you haven't, please hit the like button. It improves the odds that people will find this after the fact. That's absolutely true, Bradford. Thank you for that. Hit the like button. And then when you're done, feel free to share this video anywhere you like because that is also a huge help. Even if you don't have any money at all, you can't buy any of my RPG Pundit Presents products, you can't support me on Patreon, or you can't buy any of my RPGs like Lion and Dragon right now. If you don't have a single dime on you, but you want to help, the best ways you can help are by liking the video and sharing the video. And that makes a huge difference, actually, because you know that YouTube is not going to be doing a damn thing to promote my channel, right? Just like they don't do a damn thing to promote anybody's channel who is part of, the wrong side as far as they see. Redstone says, someone should do a series called Professor What and steal BBC's audience. I don't think it's quite as easy as that. I don't think that would quite work. I'm not sure if you can catch lightning in a bottle again. Like it's very hard to change it enough and yet appeal in exactly the same way Doctor Who appeals. Even when they, the American TV movie, I mean, it was awful. They might have been able to succeed in an American version of Doctor Who with a British actor, of course, but even then, I doubt it. I don't even think you could. I don't think even Canadians can make it Doctor Who. I think it's got to be British. Gracie Smith, didn't Mercer say if you think Kavanaugh is innocent, you don't belong here, or something similar? He did say something similar to that. I don't think it was those exact words, but he basically suggested that anyone that doesn't unquestionably agree that Kavanaugh was a rapist, anyone who doesn't unquestionably agree with that is not someone they want as part of their fandom, you know, and is in fact someone who I think that was where the mental health. I don't remember if it was about that or immigration, but either way, you know, it was like his comment in response to my criticism of his condemnation was that, you know, people who think the wrong way should get therapy, you know, I suppose by force, you know, and I suppose from the right type of therapist, though, since 95% of psychologists in North America are self-described as heavily left-leaning, I guess that would be a given. Kevin the Jury said Mercer went full believe all women. Yeah, well, obviously. Unless the woman is conservative. Of course, then you wouldn't believe all women. Buried Axblade says, Wizard of the Coast next product will be How Lenin Won. Yeah, I don't quite think so, but it might be something equivalent to that. Lenin is problematic because he's male and cis. I mean, seriously, I'm waiting for that. I mean, they've already basically said that, you know, Martin Luther King is his fundamental ideological belief is white supremacy. So if they can say that about Martin Luther King, I'm pretty much just waiting for them to say, no, you can't accept what Lenin said. Because he was a man. Fantaclaus, have you looked at Old School Essentials yet? Any thoughts? I have no idea what Old School Essentials even is. So I guess not. Bradford says, women are obsessed with status and acceptability. They use social proof as shorthands for these things. Seeing attractive women playing D&D was social proof. Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that, but yes, fundamentally that's true, right? Like, we all know that there are certain cues that are particularly used by women in society that work differently than the cues men use to determine what is kind of socially, you know, social hierarchies within women and male groups. And with women, there is very much this element of social approval for certain activities. And the way that it's very interesting. Like, this is a really, you know, you guys with the comments have really revealed something to me. That's absolutely right. That it wasn't gamers that never wanted women gamers to play. It was women that never wanted women to play D&D until now, right? And so the what has happened now is that popular girls have suddenly said that D&D is okay to play. So other girls can now play it. But before that, they said it wasn't okay to play and hated any girls that played it. The people that discriminated against girls in D&D were girls who didn't play D&D. Those were the people that discriminated against girls in D&D. That's a huge deal when you think about it. You got people, Vorpal Anvil says, I'm late, I'm very, very late. Well, we're still talking. I've still got a little bit to go, I think. Not very much, I think. Otherwise, my battery's going to die or something. Grand Prairie, Alberta. It was minus 50 Celsius a few days ago. I'm so glad I'm not living in Alberta anymore. I prefer the huge heat over the huge cold, to be honest. Same Riser says, what would the medieval authentic equivalent to a neckbeard be? Huh, that's a good question. That's I guess it depends on the medieval period, but it would either be a Dominican monk or it would be those rowdy college students at Oxford and Cambridge, you know, the Oxford and Cambridge scholars. Lord Metal Demon says, RPG Pundit, thank you for answering my questions. Well, that's why I do these live streams from time to time. It's really interesting to interact with some of the fans. Judd Goswick says, I also multitask while listening to the Pundit Radio Hour. Well, yeah, obviously that makes sense. Darren P says, I demand a visit from Chungus. Well, Chungus and her sister, neither of them are props that I bring out myself. They either show up or they don't. I don't want to use my cats to get more views. I don't want to force them. Right now, I have no idea exactly where they were. Last time I saw them, they were laying on the floor, just, belly up and trying to bear the heat. I doubt that they're going to make an appearance here. I think my voice is going to go before my battery does. Redstone says, question, is it possible to have Lion and Dragon support for Roll20? I have no idea how that would happen. I have no idea how to do that. I would need someone to explain that and for that to be explained to the publisher. My guess is probably not. Also, Roll20, from what I understand, is quite troublesome. And if you watch the last episode of Inappropriate Characters, we talked about how recently Roll20 denied the use of an avatar that was labeled, it was a Wild West avatar or a character or whatever, one of those icons. It was a Wild West set of icons, and one of the characters was a Mexican federale, Mexican police, right? It was not in any way stereotypical. It wasn't even like the big sombrero type stereotype of a Mexican or anything like that. But because it said the word Mexican in it, they said that's a derogatory word, and so they denied it. And it's not the first thing we've heard from Roll20 about that sort of stuff. I suspect that my stuff would probably not be welcome there, but who knows? Same Riza says, since the left have taken control of almost everything, they're finding that the only way they can go is down. Well, yeah, of course, eventually, yes. I think that it's, like I said, there's probably going to be a very exciting year. It's going to be a year where they're going to get some victories and we're going to get some victories. And then in November, they're going to be crushingly defeated again. And they're going to riot, probably, assuming that we don't have the Boogaloo happen before then. They're going to be causing all kinds of crazy rioting and damage and stuff that will go way out of hand. People might die, I don't know, and then that's going to kind of be the last straw, which will allow a more moderate left to disavow them finally. And at the same time, the general public will just be sick of them by then. And I think you'll see that they'll have no push anymore anywhere in social media where, they're going to be, if someone in 2021 I think that by March of 2021, if someone goes on the internet and says, if you don't like this show, it's because you're a racist, everyone is going to laugh at them and no one is going to take that seriously. They won't be able to threaten people in that way anymore. Joel Clark says, can vouch for playing it in the background. You just got me through some ball-busting homework, Pundit Mercy. Well, no problem, Joel. I'm glad to hear it. What else have we got here? Same Riza says, Josie Smollett was attacked by white supremacist Nigerians in Chicago. Yeah, I guess white supremacy knows no bounds of race anymore, apparently. Vesuvius says, why is sexual dimorphism completely ignored in the hobby? Pretending men are no different from women is the Marxist core of third-wave feminism. I guess it depends how you look at it, right? I don't know exactly what you're demanding. I think, for example, having maximum ability scores being different for men and women is it's kind of a flaw of design. I don't care about the politics of it. I care about the question of it as a matter of design. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's based on these notions of trying to somehow meticulously model realism in very specific things, but not in anything else. That is like a flawed way of looking at game design. So it's not something I would ever recommend, for example. And I'm pretty sure you can't claim I'm a third wave feminist. Nicholas Taylor says, old school essentials are very nicely laid out. Actual retro clone of basic expert. No house rules aside from optional setting AC. Okay, fine, but there are like 5 other retro clones of basic experts. So why would someone buy that and not the others? In fact, I'm pretty sure now you can buy the basic expert set from Drive-Thru RPGs. So, like, what's the point of a product like that? It's like I was saying earlier in the evening. I don't know if you were here, Nicholas, when I was talking about this, about my opinion on retro clones, but there's something that doesn't really have much of a point now to make. Like, in fact, not even having a retro clone with 1 or 2 house points has much of a point to make. Same Rice says a lot of women are too conformist, but that might just be a normie thing. Well, yeah, I think people in general are conformist. It's not just women. But the interesting thing is they're conformist in different ways, right? Like if you look at the study of scenarios, environments like high schools, students, teenagers, all that sort of stuff, and you kind of like analyze the psychology of it. They're driven, the way that dominance hierarchies are established from girls are completely different from how they're established from boys. Which lends truth to things like, that if a boy is a bully, then he's going to, punch you or throw you in a locker or something like that, right? If a girl is a bully, she's not going to do that to another girl. Girl bullies are going to be unbelievably more vicious, actually, than a boy bully, and unbelievably more creative, and they're going to be using social power for bullying, right? And because our society as a whole has kind of been feminized in a way, that's exactly what's happened now, right? The SJWs are basically female high school bullies, right? Whether or not they're female actually, right? But what I mean is that they use that same natural kind of social dominance structure that teenage girls use to dominate a society that feminism has rendered sufficiently effeminized that works, and that these people aren't going to be punched for it or something. This is how they've done it. Is creating these fake standards for conformity, reinforcing it by use of control of the popularity narrative, let's call it. So that's how they control Hollywood, they control academia, and they control the media, which defines what is or is not popular, and then use that as a battering ram to enforce their codes of what is propriety, and to viciously destroy anyone who does not follow their propriety, right? Like the group of girls declaring that Stacy, who pissed off the most popular girl in school, is now going to be ruthlessly hounded every day on Facebook, and is going to have rumors spread about her, and is going to be she's going to be called a slut even though she's never had sex. They're going to just destroy her reputation and try to drive her to suicide, that's the standard operating procedure for female dominance hierarchy in high school. Is exactly what they're doing in society today, where if you disagree with an SJW, they will declare that you're a racist, sexist, homophobe. They'll call your employers. They'll hound you constantly on every part of Facebook and on every part of social media in general. They'll try to convince companies not to sell products to you. They're going to try to convince people to blacklist you. They're going to try to make sure you can never find another job. They're going to try to make sure that your credit cards get canceled, and that they're literally, again, trying to drive you to suicide. They're using that exact same tactic, right? Anyway, Vesuvius says, Roll20 excluded the Dawnforged cast or one of these groups of friends from creating a sponsored gaming group because they were white men and they didn't want to revive white men. Yes, that's right. So, yeah, Roll20's got challenging situation. Happy Bear says, isn't Roll20 full of weebs and furries? Kevin DeJoy says, weebs and furries have full penetration at this point. Yeah, I guess, unfortunately. But first we'll take the SJWs, and then we'll deal with the weebs and furries. Same Rise says, white supremacist. Sorry, Roll20 is white supremacist for not allowing Mexican stuff in their system. Yeah, well, that would, if it was a slightly different circumstance, that would be a massive campaign against Roll20, right? Like the idea that Mexican is a dirty word to them. The word Mexican to them is a derogatory word. It's a They're saying it's a dirty word. That's nuts to me. It's crazy. I've lived in Mexico. I certainly never heard that Mexican was a dirty word there. Vesuvius says, about sexually dimorphic attribute bonuses, it could actually diversify the genders players pick. Also, it could allow for more dynamic diversity in the core races. I think that's really first of all, I don't think that's why people who are desperately interested in having that want it there. Like, I think maybe not yours, Vesuvius, if I want to be really generous, but I think most people that I've seen that demand that happens are demanding it for ideological reasons. So it's just as silly as the people that are demanding that there be like 52 genders in a D&D book. And in both cases they invoke realism, but first of all, in D&D, characters are all meant to be outliers anyways. And second, in a 3 to 18 spread, there is not enough difference in human ability that you cannot imagine a woman without a strength of 18 or a man that I don't know, that would have less what would women be better at in your setup? I don't know, but obviously the notion is women shouldn't be as strong, right? But that's just that's not accurate in a game where your characters are meant to be heroes. They're meant to be outliers anyways, right? So you could certainly have a woman with 18 strength. Lord Metal Demon says, question, what was the thought process when you decided to make frogmen the monster antagonists from the mainland for Dark Albion? Why frogmen and not some other type of foul creature? Lord Metal Demon, I don't know if you're aware of this, but from a very long time ago to the British, the French, one of the one of the derogatory terms that the British used for the French was frogs, right? So the idea that the Republic of France, which was not a republic, sorry, the Kingdom of France was, which was very, very decadent, and so it was perfect. They were the villains of the 100-Year War, at least from the British point of view. It was an ideal scenario if I was going to make more fantastical someplace, and also it's across the sea, it's on the continent, right? So it doesn't. It's not something that gets immediately in the face of the medieval authentic thing. So that's why it was frogmen, and that's why it was in the equivalent of France, and that's why they are frogmen, right? So that was the whole motivation. A lot of people talking about their pronouns. Looks like I've finally gotten caught up here. I will note, by the way, that Dark Albion was published by a French publisher, and my editor was a French editor. So before people say, "Oh, he's anti-French," blah blah blah, right? Like, it was literally published by the French, and who thought it was hilariously funny that the monarchy, because remember, in the what is now Frogland, right, in the Dark Albion setting, it's not that they're all frogs. Not all French people are frogs. There are French people who were the Frankish people in the Dark Albion lingo, right? And so like they're all humans, right? They were conquered by the frogs that became the ruling class, right? Because the actual Frankish kings were so useless and decadent that they fell to the frogmen. So you got you can definitely play a heroic Frankish warrior who is, fled to Albion because of the evil frogmen. Solomon Kane says, even the French are anti-French. All right. I guess that's true these days. Certainly Macron is anti-French. He's been trying to kill enough of them. Lord Maldina says, why is there no L&D or Lion Dragon or Dark Albion merchandise? I want a t-shirt or a coffee mug to show my loyalty, damn it. Well, it's a good idea, I guess. I don't know. I'd have to talk to the publishers. I don't even know which publisher, because there's like now been 3 different publishers in some way associated with Dark Albion and Lion and Dragon. Buried Axeblade says, I wish they were called Yellow Jackets, not Yellow Vests. Yeah, the Yellow Jackets would be more badass, no question about it. All right, it seems like we're starting to wind down here. For the past 2 hours, we've been talking mostly about RPG stuff and a little bit of other stuff, but that's, I guess I'll close a little bit by talking about how I was right. One of my favorite topics is getting to say I told you so. If you look back in my videos, I did a video that one of the only videos I've ever done in this channel that has not been, at least in very significant part, about RPGs, right? But I went out of my way to do a non-RPG video. It's one of just 2 or 3 I think I've done. That was about Watchmen, the TV series. And in it, I predicted correctly that in spite of how at that time they were claiming that Watchmen got the greatest ratings of all time or something like that, that Watchmen in fact was doing horrendously bad, because all the real statistics, all the actual stuff, the ratings that you could see were abysmal. They were worse than like Batwoman's, right? Which was also abysmal. They're worse than Doctor Who, I think, which is unbelievably abysmal right now, right? And yet they were claiming that no, but like later viewership has been just amazing. It's just been so many, right? And, and I said, look, they're already starting to gear up. At that time, even there was even some people saying, well, but there still might not be a second season. You never know. And I said, look, these guys, this is an unbelievably failing series that is beloved of a tiny part of extreme SJWs. But I think that it's doing so badly that it won't be saved. So they're going to find some excuse to not save it. They're probably going to pretend that, well, it's just perfect exactly as it is, so we're not going to continue it or something like that. And I was exactly right. That's exactly what happened, right? They've announced that there's not going to be a season 2 of Watchmen, even though apparently it sort of ended in a cliffhanger. I don't know because I haven't watched it exactly, but I've been told that. And yeah, it's just hilariously funny that I was completely right about it. I think it's another nail in the coffin of the SJW movement, right? Because these guys, now they've killed Watchmen again, right? And I think that maybe, probably Watchmen is not something that they should be trying to make more money out of because it goes against Alan Moore's wishes. But there was certainly the expectation that it could have made the money, and it didn't. And they've failed horribly, just like they've failed with all these other SJW projects. And it's getting to the point that the money people are saying, no, we're not going to do it anymore. Forget it, Dracopol, that the director walked away is the official story of why Watchmen is not going to continue. But I don't think that's the real story. Now, maybe the director didn't really want to continue, but if the series had been a success, you would be absolutely certain they would have done another series with a different showrunner. They absolutely would have. So this was a convenient excuse for them to be able to say, like, the director actually saved them. And I think he probably was very loud about his not wanting to be involved in a second season because he knew it was going to get canceled. This was the only way to make his series, to still be able to claim that his series was a huge success, and to still be able to claim that that the decision had nothing to do with SJW politics being crap, right, and being get woke, go broke scenario. So it's a very clever thing that he did and that they did to try to cover their asses, but it's absolutely transparent. Kevin DeJory, yes, Gillette CEO said it was totally worth it to lose billions after their horrible anti-male commercials in a product that is exclusively for men. Sorry, women can have beards now, so I guess not exclusively, but yeah, the Gillette CEO said that. But Gillette, as far as I know, is a company that has shareholders, and you can bet that that's going to come back to bite them eventually, right? And the continuance of that sort of thing is going to continue. It's going to be something that's going to end up meeting pushback in very big ways. Oh my. Well, I think I really am losing my voice now, so I should probably put a stop to this. Thank you everybody who's been watching. I would ask you again, please share the video, please like the video, whether or not you're watching it live right now or whether you're watching it after the fact. Please spread it around and share my other videos. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And if you want to support me, you can support me on Patreon, you can support me on PayPal, or you can buy my books like Lion and Dragon and Dark Albion and Arrows of Indra. And my newest book, which has already become a bestseller, which is the Old School Companion, which is a source book that you can use in any OSR or D&D style of game, that is full of material to add more medieval authentic stuff into your gaming, right, into your setting and into your mechanics too, with stuff like magic rules and things like that. 266-page book. I think I'm trying to remember the exact price right now, but I'm pretty sure that it's what, $29.95, is it? Yeah, it's $29.95 for the book and PDF on DriveThruRPG. So it's a great deal too. Be sure to check that out. Be sure to support me if you can. If you can't support me by buying my products or by just throwing money at me by Patreon or PayPal, then you can support me by sharing the video and by liking the video. I hope everybody enjoyed this. Buried Axeblade says, before we go, can I get a job in Uruguay? Do I have to speak or just understand Spanish? Want to roomie? I do not want to roomie right now. And if you came to live in Uruguay, you probably could get a job. You'd have to get used to a very big change of lifestyle. And if you don't speak any Spanish, you would probably find it fairly hard. There's a lot of people here that speak English. I mean, one of my games here is in English, and most of the players are Uruguayans. They're not foreigners living here, right? But if you have no Spanish at all, then the only job you'd probably be able to do would be either some very low level job in assuming you're not like me and you can work from anywhere in the world at the job you currently have, right? But I'm guessing not. So you'd probably only be able to work at some kind of a call center where you'd pretend to be from the United States, or from teaching English and like conversational English at a place like the Berlitz Institute. Both of those are relatively low paying jobs. And I mean, you can live pretty comfortably here on a lot less than you can live in the first world, but you have to be used to a very different kind of lifestyle than most middle class first world people are used to. You have to, you have to not expect to live the same way. It's not a like situation, right? So yeah, I guess that's the answer for anyone wondering. If you do speak Spanish, that makes it easier. Of course, the best way to live in South America is if you either have some kind of work online, and don't, it wouldn't matter where you live. So if you're like a freelancer of some kind and you can do your job anywhere, it's going to be cheaper to do it here than to do it in New York for sure. And or if you're on a fixed income of some kind, you're retired, you have a trust fund or something like that. If you have a trust fund, you're probably an SJW, so don't come. But yeah, that's the answer to that. I guess on that note, on that terrible disappointment, we have reached the end of the live stream. Currently smoking near a poker plus country doctor. Thank you everyone who listened.